Hello, my name is Jacob, and I am an educational specialist degree candidate in elementary education. This presentation is titled Letting Go of Control and Building Self Regulation in Yourself and Others. Before I get started, I want to name something important. Control is often praised, it's associated with responsibility, productivity, with success. But through this experience, I learned that control and self regulation are not the same thing, and confusing the two can actually interfere with development. The purpose of this video is to explore struggles with control, where those struggles come from, and how they can be addressed. Some people struggle with having too much control, and others can struggle with having too little control. Either extreme impacts relationships, it impacts emotional health and day to day functioning. What makes this topic especially important to me is that control issues are often treated as personality traits, and we say things like, that's just how I am. But developmentally or developmental psychology asks us a different question. Where did this pattern come from, and is it still serving us? In this presentation, I'll share my own experiences working on control with myself and control with somebody else, relevant developmental theories that align with these issues, and strategies that supported growth for myself and for somebody else. The central idea of this presentation is simple but powerful. Control can feel helpful, but too much or too little control can cause problems. Control creates predictability, and predictability can feel regulating. But developmentally, growth often requires tolerating discomfort. Giving ourselves and others room to make choices, take risks, and learn from outcomes are fundamental in our growth and our releasing of control. When I examined my own behavior, control showed up in a lot of areas, including strict routines, extreme organization at home and at work, correcting others based on their communication, the words that they said, and redoing tasks that were done by somebody else that I thought I could improve. At the time, I didn't see these as issues. I saw them as responsible and efficient, and I saw them as a way to give my life increased structure and stability. But when I reflected more honestly, I noticed how much mental energy these behaviors required and how little flexibility they really allowed. That was my first sign that control might not be helping me meet the goal that I had set out for. Over time, this pattern started to strain relationships with my husband, with friends, coworkers, family. What I intended as helpful often felt critical or mistrusting to others. It also set up unrealistic expectations on myself and on those around me. Here was the key realization. Control did not reduce my anxiety in the long term, it increased it. Even if control gave me momentary peace, my peace was completely dependent on whether or not I had control. It also increased stress for myself and for the people around me. Erikson's psychosocial theory of development helped me understand where this pattern may have originated. As a queer person growing up in a predominantly Christian, conservative environment of the Deep South, feelings of shame and fear emerged early on. I learned that controlling myself, my actions, my words, controlling how others perceived me, felt like a way for me to stay safe. Control became a substitute for autonomy in an environment where autonomy and psychological safety didn't feel guaranteed. The question that I eventually had to ask myself as an adult was, is this still protecting me, or is it harming me? I began by identifying where control showed up most frequently in my life, as I outlined previously and as shown in this chart. Using principles from exposure and response prevention acceptance and commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and self-determination theory, I intentionally created strategies that could help me practice releasing control over these areas of my life. So this included leaving things unfinished or out of place, delegating tasks without over-explaining or correcting, and changing rigid self-talk from must do to should do. This was uncomfortable at first. Letting go initially increased my anxiety, and that discomfort showed me how much I relied on control for emotional regulation and how important it was for me to remove that control and allow myself to grow in true emotional regulation that's not dependent on whether or not I am in control of the situation. While surveyors completed weekly surveys, this graph focuses on my results from pre-assessment and post-assessment after my 5 weeks of implementing the changes outlined previously. The graph shows decreases in controlling behaviors across all measured control areas, along with reduced stress reported by others. What surprised me most is that relationship enjoyment remained high. I do think I might have been rated high just as a way for them to be nice to me. But it also told me something important, which was people didn't need me to control situations to feel to feel close to me or to feel stable in our relationship. They just needed presence, flexibility, and my trust. So I wanted to apply these insights beyond myself. So I worked with a third grade student using the pseudonym Sophie for her. What stood out immediately upon working with her was how similar the patterns were, despite our different ages, our different stages of life, and our different sides of the control spectrum. Sophie showed impulsivity, boundary issues, and difficulty monitoring her behavior. She would often kick others who were in front of her in line, or touch or poke others as a way to annoy them. She would make messes in the cafeteria or play in the bathroom and hang from stalls. She would show very regular off-task behaviors and cause a lot of distractions for others. And traditional consequences were not showing any effect. When I stopped and thought about this and how increased consequences hadn't been helpful, it became more clear that this might not have been a case of defiance. And I began to think that this may just be a developmental issue, and the strategies being applied were not appropriate to address her stage of development. So the main issue that I had with Sophie was her inhibitory control and her ability to stop herself before acting in a way that she shouldn't. Many adult corrections from myself or from other adults in her life that hadn't worked were most likely outside of her zone of proximal development. And this reinforced something essential. Behavior improves through scaffolding, not just through increased pressure and increased punishments. So thinking of her zone of proximal development, I created a behavior chart to guide in her growing her inhibitory control response. This behavior chart focused just on one goal instead of listing specific goals for different settings or situations around the school. This was accompanied with multiple daily conversations between her and I about her performance and progress throughout the day. And it also included opportunities for rewards and recognition. The chart also required daily initials from a parent, which led to conversations at home and keeping her adults at home in communication about her performance at school and her growth in these areas that we had discussed. Sophie's weekly goal was to have 4 out of 5 successful days where she was able to stop and correct herself most of the time throughout the day, and she was able to come up with a reward for the week should she hit her 4 out of 5 day goal. Now, one important thing to remember is that Sophie and I thought together about her day as a whole and whether or not she earned a successful day. She did not have to have a perfect day to be successful, and that's something that she knew, and we thought together to generalize her day and decide whether or not she met her goal. So Sophie and I used this behavior chart for 2 weeks. Prior to week 1, she was really not having any successful days. Throughout week 1, she earned 2 out of 5 successful days. And by week 2, she earned 4 out of 5 successful days, which met her weekly goal. Throughout this 2-week period, I observed noticeable improvements in her peer relationships in the classroom and around the school. And it was also clear that her mind, her body, her behavior in general had calmed down a lot due to her new emotional regulation and self-regulation. She was obviously becoming more focused on her actions and shifting her behavior before doing something wrong. Her self-reflection, even just from a 2-week period, her growth in self-reflection was very encouraging. So these experiences taught me a lot about control and how control really is not the goal. A balanced life is the goal. Whether we're talking about adults or children, or having too little or too much control, growth here requires self-awareness, or maybe awareness from others, support from others, and a lot of repeated intentional practice over time. My primary insights from this experience were, first, trying to control everything creates more stress, not less. This is something that I was finally able to recognize with myself. I would feel much more stable and secure when I knew that everything was within my control. I didn't feel like I could trust others to give me that stability, and the more control that I had, the more stable and safe, psychologically safe, I felt. But it was clear that this wasn't true self-regulation, because as soon as I lost any amount of that control, I felt that anxiety return and that instability return. So trying to control everything in the end does not help you reduce your stress and anxiety. And second, people improve through support more than they do through punishment. This was very true with my experience with Sophie. I had experienced almost a whole school year with her, and in trying to fix her behavior, had increased punishments, increased communication with her parent, and was not seeing improvement. However, within 2 weeks of a supportive, reinforcing behavior goal period, she was like a brand new student. And so I really saw how that encouraging support and her reinforcement and her goals, her rewards, did in 2 weeks what almost an entire school year of punishment hadn't been able to do yet. So working within her zone of proximal development and using support rather than punishment was something that brought me to the goal, brought her to the goal that we have been hoping for a long time. And then lastly, my main pieces of advice to you are, first of all, start small. You do not need to try to change everything all at once. Allow yourself to be good enough, allow things to be good enough, and acknowledge that progress is what we're looking for, not perfection. And then lastly, reflect on your behavior. Change doesn't come if we don't reflect. We have to think about our current state, where we were and where we want to be, and that reflection can guide us in our growth. So what this could look like practically, it could include journaling to keep a record of your progress and whether or not your changes are working. Goal setting, so you have a clear picture of what you are hoping to achieve and can see whether or not you are making it to that goal. And then getting feedback from others, which is probably the most crucial. because we often are not able to fully view our behavior or view our control or lack thereof or how it's impacting others. So it's important for us to get that feedback from people that we trust. It's important for us to be honest and open with people that we trust if we want to specifically target issues and improve in those areas. With all this information in mind, one thing I really want you to remember is that you're not broken, you're still developing. Struggle is not a sign of failure, it's a sign that growth is happening. So, a few other things to remember in conclusion is that while control can feel helpful, it easily becomes very harmful when it is used incorrectly or when the control is not there. Too much or too little self control is unhealthy. And there are many tangible changes that can be made, tangible strategies that can be used that are backed by research, that are backed by extensive psychological theory, years of research and theory that show that these strategies are helpful. And just remember that life is about growing, and that's what we're doing by reflecting on ourselves and trying to improve. This experience reminded me that development doesn't stop in childhood. It continues every time we intentionally reflect on ourselves and make adjustments to improve. So, 3 things that you can do right now is think about one area where you can let go of control this week. Name it, decide on it, and then comment that decision. Put it in writing, make it public. Comment what you would like to improve and how you plan to do it. And then make sure to tell a trusted friend or a family member, someone that can actually give you feedback and hold you accountable. Because again, that feedback, that accountability, and that reflection are very important when we are trying to make progress toward a goal. So thank you for watching. I hope this was informative and helpful to you, and I wish you the best of luck on your development journey.